grade 7 learners. Welcome back to Felictions TV. Are you ready for another fruitful day of learning experience about literature? Great! I am your teacher on screen, Miss CRISTINA M. LADERA, and I'll be your learning buddy for today. But before we start, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for updates of our latest video. Our lesson for today is Types of Conflict, and here are the objectives. First, identify the protagonist and antagonist in a given reading selection, classify the types of conflict present in a given selection, and give possible solutions to given conflict. Do you watch TV series or movies? Of those you have watched, who do you think is the leading man or the leading lady? How about the villains? Have you ever felt disliking a character because of their actions? It's okay, and that is normal. In every story, there's a conflict between a protagonist and an antagonist. Protagonist is the central character of the story, and the antagonist is the opposing character that we usually hate because they cause problems. Now, let's try figuring out which is the protagonist and antagonist. In this activity, identify the protagonist and the antagonist from the following pictures. Number 1. Georgia and Emma from the drama Ika-6 na Utos. Who do you think is the protagonist and who is the antagonist? The protagonist is Emma and the antagonist is Georgia. Very good! Number 2. Thanos and Iron Man from the Marvel Universe. Who do you think is the protagonist and who is the antagonist? The protagonist is Iron Man and the antagonist is Thanos. Very good! Next is Red Queen and Alice from the story Alice in Wonderland. Who do you think is the protagonist and who is the antagonist? The protagonist is Alice and the antagonist is the Red Queen. Great! Now that we can identify a protagonist and an antagonist, we can now understand more about conflict. So what is conflict? Conflict is a struggle or a problem between opposing characters or opposing forces. Some stories can have multiple conflicts. It can either be external or internal conflict. External conflict refers to the opposition between an individual and other characters or forces. There are 3 kinds of external conflict: man versus man, person versus society, person versus nature. The first kind of external conflict is man versus man. It is the opposition between the main character and other character or characters in the story. For example, Sakuragi and Rukawa compete for the same position on the basketball team. In this example, there are 2 opposing characters, Sakuragi and Rukawa. Character versus character. That is why it is called man versus man. Second is person versus society. This type of conflict happens when the character has a problem with the society in which they live, including laws or beliefs of groups. For example, do you remember Katniss Everdeen from Hunger Games? Katniss Everdeen tries to put a stop to the corrupt Capitol's rule over their state of Panem. Another kind of external conflict is person versus nature. This is when the main character's problem is a natural force, like a predatory animal, a typhoon, or a contagious disease. For example, during a vacation, a family encounters a huge tsunami. In this example, the character's opposition or the opposing force is the tsunami. Another type of conflict is internal conflict. It refers to an inner conflict within a main character. This kind of conflict is called person versus self, which happens within the character's mind. For example, Alexa caught her friend Jamie stealing from a classmate. Now Alexa must choose between keeping her friendship with Jamie and doing the right thing. In this example, the main character's conflict is making decisions. That is why it is a person versus self. Now, let's practice what we have learned. In this activity, examine the following video clips and identify the types of conflict if it's external or internal. Let's start! Video clip number 1 from the movie Despicable Me 3. What type of conflict is this?
Dance fight!
This is external. Very good. This is an example of man versus man because the character Drew and Balthazar are two opposing characters. Video clip number 2 from the movie Titanic. What type of conflict is this? This is an external conflict. Excellent! This is person versus nature because the protagonists Jack and Rose struggle as the ship sinks into the ocean. Video clip number 3 from the movie Moana. What type of conflict is this?
I'm not the right person. You have to choose someone else. Choose someone else.
This is internal conflict. Brilliant! This is an example of person versus self because in this clip, the character Moana doubts herself. Video clip number 4 from the movie Coco. What type of conflict is this? This is external conflict. Good thinking. This is an example of person versus society because the conflict is between the protagonist Miguel and the antagonistic force of his family's beliefs about music. Excellent job! I knew you were a fast learner. In addition, to easily identify the types of conflict in a story, we should know the character and their opposing forces. We need to know the protagonist and the antagonist in order to identify what type of conflict it is. So, let's try. In this activity, analyze the protagonist and the antagonist or the antagonistic force of each scenario, then identify whether the conflict is external, man versus man, person versus society, person versus nature, or internal, person versus self. So, you need to do 3 things. Find the protagonist, the antagonist or the antagonistic force, and identify what type of conflict it is. So, let's start! Number 1. Daniel is a new student. In his new school, he is bullied by his classmate Jake. Who is the protagonist and who is the antagonist? The protagonist is Daniel and the antagonist is Jake. What type of conflict is this? This is external, man versus man. Very good. Number 2. Christine was once teased for being heavy, but then she lost a lot of weight. Now, Christine is very skinny, but she still sees herself as an overweight girl. Who is the protagonist and what is the antagonistic force? The protagonist is Christine, and the antagonistic force is Christine's insecurities of being overweight. What type of conflict is this? This is internal, person versus self. Great! Number 3. After Kylie and her friends run out of gas on a road trip, they find themselves stranded in the middle of the desert with no phone signal, little water, and brutal desert sun. Kylie and her friends make a desperate attempt to find water. Who is the protagonist and what is the antagonistic force? The protagonists are Kylie and her friends. The antagonistic force is that they have no signal, little water, and the brutal desert sun. What type of conflict is this? This is external, person versus nature. Bravo! Number 4. The company where Mrs. Cruz works had a new policy where only male employees can get a promotion. She disagrees with the policy and tries to seek equality. Who is the protagonist and what is the antagonist and the antagonistic force? The protagonist is Mrs. Cruz, and the antagonist and the antagonistic force are the company and the company's new policy. What type of conflict is this? This is external, person versus society. Great! Amazing! Now that we have learned about conflict and how to identify each type of conflict, we should also remember that understanding conflict is important because it helps us in creating or finding a solution. Just like Travis Kalanick said, every problem has a solution. You just have to be creative enough to find it. So let's try. From the scenarios of learning task 3, choose the appropriate solution for each conflict. Are you ready? Let's start! Number 1. Daniel is a new student in his new school. He is bullied by his classmate Jake. If you were Daniel, what would you do? A. Confront the bully by fighting back. B. Tell your teachers about it so they can help you make peace with Jake. Or letter C. Let Jake bully you again. The answer is B. Very good. Number 2. Christine was once teased for being heavy, but then she lost a lot of weight. Now, Christine is very skinny, but she still sees herself as an overweight girl. If you were Christine's friend, what will you do to help her? A. Try to convince her of how beautiful she is. B. Encourage her to lose more weight. Or C. Ignore her insecurities. The answer is letter A. Very good. Number 3. After Kylie and her friends run out of gas on a road trip, they find themselves stranded in the middle of the desert with no phone signal, little water, and brutal desert sun. Kylie and her friends make a desperate attempt to find water. If you were Kylie, what would you do? A. Blame your friend for not bringing enough water. B. Stay in the car and wait for long hours for someone to pass by. Or C. Try to walk and find a shelter that has supplies or areas that have phone signal. The answer is letter C. Very good. Number 4. The company where Mrs. Cruz works had a new policy where only male employees can get a promotion. She disagrees with the policy and tries to seek equality. If you were Mrs. Cruz, would you protest against the company? A. Yes, because everybody should be treated equally. B. Yes, just because I love to argue. Or C. No, because my boss might terminate me from work. The answer is A. Remember, be humble, be teachable, and always keep learning. I am Miss Ladera, and thank you for watching.